So the stigma that I see still with people are the same than the one I had, meaning we're not educated. So we believe what we've been told, maybe the media, maybe movies, and psychedelics were never framed as for their healing properties. It was always about recreational, and it's two very different things.
Have you ever considered that microdosing could be the key to enhancing your productivity and creativity? Today, we're joined by Peggy Van de Plassche, a former finance executive turned advocate for alternative medicine. With her groundbreaking approach, Peggy explores how small doses of psychedelics, like psilocybin, can help us manage stress, boost our emotional well-being, and unlock our true potential. In this episode, we'll dive into her insights from her book, The Microdose Diet, and discuss how this innovative practice could transform not just our personal lives, but our professional journeys as well. So if you're curious about the future of wellness and how microdosing fits into the world of biohacking, you won't want to miss this conversation. Hey, good afternoon, Peggy. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me this afternoon. I'm very interested in this topic.
I'm so happy to be here and really looking forward to answering any questions. And I love your podcast, you know that. So I'm very happy to be on the other side today, on the guest side. So really, really happy about that.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, first off, what exactly is microdosing for people who are unclear? And how does that differ from, say, a full psychedelic experience?
Yes, so microdosing, if you just look at the name, it means taking a very small dose of a substance. Here, obviously, we're talking about psychedelics, especially psilocybin, which is magic mushroom. So you're taking a very, very small dose of magic mushroom every over 2 or 3 days over a long period of time. So that is what microdosing psychedelics or psilocybin is. The big difference with a full psychedelic experience is first the quantity. So you microdose with 100 milligram of magic mushroom, while for a full experience you take between 3 to 5 grams. So that's quite a big difference. And the other big difference is the period. A psychedelic experience usually lasts 6 to 7 hours. Yes, you're supposed to prepare before, integrate after, but the experience by itself is only 6 to 7 hours. While microdosing is something you do regularly, as I said, every 2 or 3 days. So it's part of your daily routine, of your daily life. So there is not really a start and an end. So it's two very different things. The only thing they have in common is that actually they use the same substance to rewire your brain. I guess that's the only thing they have in common.
Okay, so for someone listening, what would microdosing aim to resolve in their life?
What I see in terms of benefits and what I've been hearing the most from the people who are microdosing magic mushroom, it's 3 types of benefits. The first is performance. So people who are looking to have an increase in creativity, attention, focus, that is, I would say, a really magic tool. The first time I started microdosing, after a couple of weeks, I actually wrote first book, and I wrote the first draft in 10 days. So, that gives you a good idea of how performant you become when you microdose. But the second reason, which is the reason many people microdose and the reason I started microdosing, is mental health. And think about stress, anxiety, depression. Some people also have signs of depression. It was my case. So you're really gonna see decrease in your level of stress, in your level of anxiety, but also you're gonna see a mood boost. So obviously that's gonna balance your depression if you have depression. So that is a big benefits, obviously. And the third bucket is more about connection. So connection to others, connection to yourself. So you're going to really see an improvement in your relationship, whether it's at work, whether it's at home. So when you combine all of that, really helps, I would say, increase the quality of your life. Because when you have a lot of anxiety, it's a bit difficult to be very creative. It's difficult to really enjoy your life. It creates a lot of tension in your life. So I would say it's like a domino effect. It will really improve all the areas of your life. But these are really the three type of benefits.
So would someone, like you said, maybe depression, in your opinion, would microdosing be more effective than pharmaceuticals? Is that sort of why they're explored?
Yeah, so actually that's interesting because psilocybin have been declared by the FDA in 2018 a breakthrough therapy for depression. And a breakthrough therapy, this classification means that the FDA believe that it's going to be a better treatment than what it exists. So this is not my answer, it's the FDA answer. So it is what they believe, and that's all the tests that are happening. One thing you need to keep in mind is that the antidepressant we've been having for the last, 5 decades, they're not there to heal you, they're there to manage the symptoms. And in theory, you're supposed to use antidepressants for just a very short period of time. And the challenge is that now you have people who've been on antidepressant for like 20 years. And that's not the way they were developed, this medication. So we have a challenge as well, is that the medications might not have been the best for healing, and we're not using them properly. And the beauty of psychedelic is this ability to rewire your brain. So it is healing, not just managing symptoms. So there are a lot of things that made us believe that it will likely be a better option eventually.
What about misconceptions when you started exploring this whole world of microdosing? Like, what did you encounter when you first started deciding, okay, maybe I want to test this myself? And what was sort of the pushback maybe you heard from friends and other professionals?
Well, listen, the first pushback was from myself to myself because, I'm 47, I'm from France, I'm sure you can hear that, and I've never done recreational drugs before. And I have been, like everyone my generation, brainwashed into thinking, well, psychedelics, it's evil, and you're gonna get high, you're gonna get hallucination, you're gonna get blind, And when I did, all these guys are talking about psychedelics suddenly. And so I started doing all the research, and I was just like, oh my God, it is actually extremely interesting, extremely promising. And I don't like to say promising because these were prescribed in the 60s, 70s. So when we're talking about promising, we're actually going back to the future or to the past, depending on how you look at time. So the stigma that I see still with people are the same than the one I had, meaning we're not educated. So we believe what we've been told, maybe the media, maybe movies. And psychedelics were never framed as for their healing properties. It was always about recreational, and it's two very different things. I don't partake in recreational activities, but whatever, people do what they want. But in terms of healing, there are a lot of benefits. But to your point, still a lot of stigma, a lot.
Yeah, and that's, when I first saw you online, I was like, okay, I definitely want to get into this topic because that's what I see is mostly the stigma, like you said, has been this negative, this is not going to be good for you. This is going to take you in a direction where you don't want to go. How about when you take microdosing, right? And you take the maybe conventional approaches to improve, your focus, your creativity. How do you feel that this differs from those traditional methods we're used to?
The way I use microdosing, and I wrote a book which is called The Microdose Diet. It's a 90-day protocol to really leverage microdosing. And I actually combine microdosing with other practices. So, for example, tapping meditation. I'm not sure if people are familiar. Tapping meditation, it's about using the meridian points in your body, tapping with your finger. And what it does is that it interrupts the signal between your brain and your body. So if you are anxious, that's going to calm you down. But also if you have limiting belief and you're connecting to that limiting belief, it's going to help you to release this belief about yourself or the world. So when you combine microdosing psilocybin with multiple modalities, as I said, tapping, but visualization, journaling, all that stuff, you really get the most of both, meaning microdosing is really good for neuroplasticity, the ability to rewire your brain, but also calm your nervous system. So instead of being in fight or flight, now you have this little space between action reaction, like we all tend to be like the dog in Pavlov experience. We hear the bell and we jump. But now you have this 1 or 2 seconds of space that the microdosing allow you. And with all these other practices, you use this 1 or 2 seconds in a better way. So it is not just the microdosing, to be totally honest, that I find is amazing. I find it's great by itself, but it won't bring you to the next level if you're just microdosing. I think you really need to have combo or coaching or hypnotherapy, like other type of modalities. It's a good combination.
And you mentioned tapping. You said you're physically just tapping your forehead or areas of your body with your...
Yes, exactly. So we have, again, it's more like a Chinese medicine, so it's more alternative healing. So we have in our body, in different points, which is basically your nervous system, a connection with some areas. So if you tap slightly with your finger points on some specific areas, not anywhere, that are connected, to your meridian, that's going to really help you with calming your nervous system. And instead of being constantly in fight or flight, that would allow to, apprehend situations in a different way, because now you're calmer and you're not in the fight or flight.
Okay. And you said psilocybin is the main use for microdosing, correct? Are there other?
So you can technically you can microdose any substance. I heard people who are microdosing Ozempic, but for different reasons, obviously. But in terms of psychedelic, people also microdose LSD. I personally, when I started studying psychedelics, I was more interested by magic mushroom because it's natural, it's easy to access, and just felt a bit safer for me. But some people, I think it's Elon Musk actually. I'm not sure if we necessarily want to follow him. That's another story. But I think he microdosed LSD. LSD, as you can imagine, it is produced in plants factories and things like that. Obviously it's not legal. It's difficult to find something that has been produced legally, so you don't really know what products you're having. Mushroom, someone can, if they want, grow that in their closet, so you have a bit more control. So that's also for me something. One is chemical, one is natural, and one I can control the quality. The other one, well, I have no idea what I'm taking.
Yeah, and I guess is it something where it depends on where you live, how you can access?
That's a very good point. When you are talking about stigma, legality is obviously a big part of it, and I don't want to call it stigma because it is legal or it is not, so it's not necessarily a stigma. If you are in Colorado, if you're in Oregon, it's legal, so it's not an issue. If you're in other states like New York, it is not, and then you have everything in between. And it is, unfortunately, I think you see that with marijuana in the US. Canada is a bit different, but it depends on the states, it depends on the county, it depends on the city. There is no federal legislation, and psychedelics benefit from something a bit different, is that a lot of clinical studies that are happening now are done and led by the Veterans Affairs, because there is a big challenge we have in most countries with first responders and veterans. Very high rate of suicide, very high rate of addiction, homelessness, all these things. So you have a big push from regulators, and what's interesting, on both sides of the aisle, to actually accelerate the studies and to accelerate the deployment of some of this medicine, because they see the limits of the current system in order to help with mental health challenges for veterans and first responders. So you see the legislation's moving fast, but it is not, I would say, everywhere already.
Yeah, definitely state by state here. How about how microdosing affects the body and the brain? Like, I see microdosing, I think, okay, it's like a micro trip, but I'm not an expert by any means. So how does that affect the body and the brain? I know you mentioned there's other elements to bring into it, whether that's hypnosis or other factors, but how would one expect it to affect the body and brain?
Yeah, so the psychedelics, actually, especially magic mushroom, focus on your serotonin receptors. in your brain. So it is something that will help with calming your body, but also, as I said, creating new pathways in your brain. That is why I really like to combine microdosing with different tools, because you want to recreate these pathways, but you want to also have control over what you recreate them with, So that's why I really like to combine. You mentioned hypnosis. I love hypnosis. Again, tapping, coaching, even therapy will be very, very beneficial as a combination, because it's really 1 + 1 = 3. It augments what you're doing. It goes deeper, faster, better. Yeah.
Well, so would one need to be in like a controlled environment?
So if you take the right dosage, of course, if you take 4 times what you're supposed to do, you're going to fail too much, but that is true for any medicine. But if you take the right amount, which I recommend around 100 milligram, which is very low, you're going to have no eye, no hallucination, no jittery, nothing, absolutely nothing. I microdose this morning because I do it every 3 days, so it was today. It's the same than when I take my omega-3 or my vitamin B. I don't feel anything in terms of physical sensation. It is something that is absolutely safe and easy to integrate in your daily routine. That is why I work with so many exec and a lot of tech entrepreneur, because that's my background, because it helps you with your performance and your mental health, but you don't have 2 hours where you feel jumpy or whatever, so you don't have any effects.
So you said 3 days a week is what you do?
I do that. So
okay.
I have some people who do once every other day. You have people like me who do once every 3 days, and you have people who do Monday to Friday. Depends of your sensitivity, depends on, what's happening in your life today. Sometimes I do a bit more. I never do less because that's the minimum kind of. But my husband microdose and he does Monday to Friday.
Okay. So how would someone say, okay, they're into the biohacking world, into longevity, they're into creating like this environment where they can thrive physically, mentally, right? How would you say microdosing does fit into that whole landscape of biohacking?
It is biohacking. Microdosing is exactly biohacking. It's not different than any of the supplements you see people support, or, I'm not going to say it's cold plunging, but it's the same rationale. And maybe you want to cold plunge and microdose. You do your combo kind of. Again, I wrote the book as a protocol, because people obviously want to understand better, especially in terms of microdosing. Okay, what is the dosage? What is the schedule? What is all that great stuff? Again, we're not talking big trip. I would never do like 3 grams of mushrooms in my basement, doing whatever. I know some people do that, and I'm just like, that's very weird. I've done experience like that, but I did it with professional guide, shamans, and that's the thing that is very different. Microdosing is not a big experience. It is something that, again, if it had not been banned 70 years ago, it's as if today you're asking me, and Peggy, your vitamin C. So when you're, you know what? That is the thing that's very funny. It's because it was banned that now we're very, oh my God. But if you're asking me, Peggy, when you take your omega-3 or vitamin C in the morning, is it something you have to not go to work, not drive for 2 hours? So that's the same thing.
Yeah, you don't know anything about it and you're curious, but you think because, like you said, banning and once the laws come into play in this state and that province, you start to wonder. How about when people want to start feeling effects? Is it, you mentioned your husband might do this many days a week, other people, clients. How quickly would the average person start noticing effects from this?
So, and it depends what you mean by effects. If you're talking about having these benefits in terms of performance or
serotonin,
yeah, okay. So that goes very fast. I would say in a week you already feel calmer. So and a week mean taking only 2 or 3 doses, like it doesn't mean 7. It really means like you did Monday, you did Thursday, and maybe Saturday or Sunday, something like that. So it goes very fast. Some people are more sensitive than others. For some people like me, they take 100 milligram and that's all. If I take just 150, technically it's 50% more, but still, if I take just 150, I'm gonna feel it. Yeah. But some people microdose with way more. One thing that I see, one of the big mistakes, and maybe let's talk about the mistakes people make when microdosing. So first, they don't have quality products. And that is the challenge because, as we mentioned, not being legal everywhere, well, people sometimes buy wherever, whatever. And I developed my own microdosing line because I had so many people who were telling me, well, how can I buy quality products? And so I became a drug dealer, kind of, because I worked with a clinic in British Columbia who already had a product because they were working with their own patient. And so they're white labeling it for me. So we have our own formulation and that is under my brand. Otherwise, it's difficult sometimes to find quality products. So I always recommend quality products, obviously, first thing first. Second, dosage. You don't need to double or triple the dose. 100 milligram is enough. You also want to be mindful of the combination because sometimes psilocybin is combined with other type of mushrooms that are legal, lion's mane, things like that. But too much lion's mane is going to be really, it's 1 + 1 = 3. So you're going to feel very high. It's not going to be the psilocybin, it's going to be the combination of both. So you want to really look quality products and a formulation that makes sense. So that is the product. Then you want to make sure you're not taking too much and you're not taking too often. But it's not different than any substance you're taking.
Yeah.
Anything you're taking, Joe, is like you want quality product, you don't want to take too much, and you don't want to take it too often. That's the same. So the same diligence apply. That's all.
And is it something where you have to take it with food, without food? Does it really depend on your tolerance level?
Yeah, so personally I take it on, in the morning, empty stomach, but sometimes I put it in my shake. I have clients who do empty stomach. I have clients who are more sensitive, so they have something to eat before at the same time. At least in the formulation I have, it's supposed to be easy on the stomach. So it depends on the product you have, So if you're very sensitive, well, maybe take it with.
Are there any limitations in terms of age, maybe too young, too old?
So I would say, obviously, don't give that to kids.
A child, yeah.
If you're pregnant, if you're breastfeeding, that's not a good idea. I would say it's good for kids to do it, not before they're 21. If you're old enough to drink, that should be okay. Ideally, you don't drink, but that's another conversation.
Yeah.
I love to have a drink, so I'm not judging. One thing as well is that if you have schizophrenia, which is very rare, but just in case, that is not a good idea because, the dissociative personalities that can be amplified with psychedelic. Usually it's more of a problem for the big journey than for microdosing, but just to be on the safe side, it's better not.
Yeah. How about we mentioned different states and different jurisdictions. Let's just pretend this becomes legal everywhere. If things continue to progress, would you figure the sort of practical integration of psychedelics in everyday life would look like?
Well, exactly as I personally do and a lot of my clients do, I have people who are literally CEOs, chair of public companies, lawyers. I have people who, and I have parents, which I think is even more important than just being very successful in your career. But they're doing it the same way they're doing any other type of supplements. So what I really, really hope is that people don't just take microdosing mindlessly in the sense that, a lot of the culture of healthcare is just like, okay, you pop a pill, you pop an Advil. I would rather have people to follow not necessarily my protocol, but a protocol that really make them benefit the most from the medicines. Having an intention, connecting to that intention when taking the dose, which I still do every time I take my dose. I always connect to the intention what I'm working on at this point, and also continue always healing. At the end of the day, if you want a better life, it's not about working more, it's about removing all the weights we have that are attached to our ankles. And that, as a combination with the microdosing, will really, I would say, improve your life. So that's really a strategic and mindfulness approach that I would love people to do when they microdose.
You talked about people who supplement. Sometimes you find, okay, I took a test earlier to find out where I'm deficient. Is there anything that someone who's curious about this could look into in advance to say, like, okay, how much do I need because my serotonin level, or wherever it might be, are low?
That's a very great question. And to be honest, I don't know. I don't think there are any tests that have been done to say, well, you're deficient in iron or vitamin C, so
exactly.
You need to take more. It has been seen more the other way around, like what are the symptoms, which is more, again, if we're looking at mental health, not performance, which is a bit different, which is more, okay, are you depressed, are you anxious, so then you should take it, but it has not been done as, do you have an imbalance in your hormones or in your other markers, so it hasn't been looked at like that, actually. That's a very good point.
Yeah, maybe in the future.
Yeah.
Well, how about people listening to you? You're putting my mind at ease for sure. What about for people who are still skeptical, still hesitant? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, and even if I put your mind at ease, it is the same advice. Educate yourself, because that's great, whether you believe what I say, whether you still have a doubt. Triangulate. So read multiple publications. You can go and check out clinical studies, literally the clinical studies, not someone telling you about the clinical studies. Trust me, you don't need a PhD to understand what it means. There is always a little extract at the top explaining the findings. So that's, I would say, and we should do that anyway for any subject, let's be honest. But I would say for a topic like that still has stigma, even more. Make your own opinion, make your own research, and then make your own decision. And you know what? You can change your mind in a year or two. If you're not comfortable today, and maybe in a year or two you have way more people around you, that's fine. That's fine. So that's not written in stone ever what you decide now.
Yeah. How do you feel microdosing might be integrated into just like these mainstream wellness practices in the future?
Yeah, I can see hopefully that it will be reimbursed by insurance companies. And I can see actually corporations by themselves understanding that if my employees first perform better, but second are mentally healthy, it's going to be an advantage to me as a corporation. So I can see a lot of, benefit plans, but also, we see more and more, especially after the pandemic, corporation explaining to their employees about, mindfulness and the important, whether it's breath work, whatever the technique. And I can see microdosing being one of that. I mean, it's a win-win-win.
Yeah, you do see a lot of things being picked up by HSA plans even. Right, that you wouldn't think would be covered before. So I could see that going in that direction too. How about if you had to pick like the biggest misconception about microdosing that you want to sort of set straight, what would that be?
Well, that is that you will feel high, You will feel something, because again, you're not feeling, if you're feeling something, you're taking too much, you should not feel anything. And the second thing is that you cannot overdose on psychedelics, and you cannot get addicted on psychedelics.
That's a good one. Addicted, yeah,
And
I think
these are very important, especially when we see what some medication are actually doing to a lot of the population in terms of addiction and overdose.
Yeah, addiction's a great one, because I think that's probably a big fear for people is, okay, now I like it, I can't live without it.
And it's the other way around, because actually psychedelics is looked at to help people unhook from addiction. So it's actually a tool to help people who live with addiction. And I mentioned that
Veterans.
was one of the first use case with alcoholism.
How about your book? Okay, can you break down how does your book take you through this? You said 90 days.
Yes, so the book is a two-part book. The first part is explaining a bit on psychedelics, is explaining a bit on the tools that I use in the process. So the first part is more educational, if I can say that, but not too dry, absolutely not. I didn't want to come up with a Bible. And then the second part is the 90-day that is broken up week by week. And so week by week, I explain what you're supposed to do. The first 3 weeks, we're doing a lot of cleanse, so detoxing your body, your environment, but also assessing where you're at in your life. And then the next 9 weeks are about exercising, because I think what's important is a lot of books or, other materials. It's all about the assessment. And I'm like, okay, that's great, but you know what? I know where my problems are at some point. Now I want you to help me, correct that. So the biggest part of the program, 9 weeks out of 12, is really about you using microdosing, using the tools I mentioned to help you go to the next level. So we go from the fear of change. I'm very big with increasing the self-worth, reframing your identity to be aligned with your goals. Very often we have goals, but our identity is significantly lower than that. And it's how you use all these tools in order to transform yourself and go to the next level. Yeah. And after, it's a rinse and repeat. So if you want to do it 2 times a year, every year, well, here you go. It's a good ROI on the book.
Yeah. Is that available most book retailers?
So it's available Amazon, obviously,
Okay.
Barnes and Nobles in the US, Indigo in Canada. But I know most people anyway now buy their book online. So yes,
Yeah.
and it's also in audiobook for people who love audiobook. And I know some people don't like books. I did an online course based on that. That some people videos, it's easier to digest than a book, and that keep them on track, so they can do that. They can also coach with me. Regardless of how much time and money you want or can allocate, there is a solution for you. That's that. And libraries, a lot of libraries actually have bought the book, so you might even be able to get it for free if you really don't want to spend any money.
Well, how about for people who do want to spend money, do want to get more in touch, find out more how to work directly with you, stay updated on your work, where would be the best place to send them?
So if you can check my website, themicrodosediet.com, and on the website they can find all the options from coaching, public speaking, the online course. So they should be able to find me directly from my website on social media, so Instagram, and I have a free newsletter. So every week I publish, so they can also find a lot of information on microdosing, psychedelics, self-development, how to use that also in your career, all of that for free. So that should be also accessible to most of them.
No, I'll make sure to put all that into the notes here for the show. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you so much, Joe. It was such a pleasure to exchange. And if anyone has any question, feel free to corral them to me, or people can reach out directly. And thank you again, and thank you for your podcast. I love it, and I find it extremely valuable. So thank you for putting it together and for inviting me today.
Of course, I had a great time. Thank you, Peggy.